Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. Well, we have a pile of stuff we're going to go through here today. The lawyer of Travis Denage, who left the CBC, although the CBC's refusing to let him go, had a great interview on Juno. Now, Juno is one of the fastest growing news agencies in Canada, and I support them 100%. They have got some of the best independent journalists, well, in Canada, period. And kudos to them for securing this amazing interview, which, as always, I post all the links below so you guys can actually watch it in its full, as well as everything else that I show. We're going to kind of hit on a few stories here, starting off with the jab or the pokey poke that happened. I don't know how else to say that. In Calgary here at the Stampede. The U.S. representatives have sent Canada a message in regards to our really bad forest management. You can't make this stuff up. The guy that I had reported on earlier, the grandparent scam, he's been arrested. This is great news. I was going to report on it actually a few days ago, but I fight for time. There's usually so much information I just want to make sure my subscribers and viewers get. So sometimes I do end up missing things, but I always say, I will keep everybody updated as I find things out and as I have time to do so. As well, the courts have actually compelled the RCMP and the TD Bank to hand over records related to freezing of a bank account of a certain person, which we're going to dabble on that here as well today. We got a few other things, and then again, this bombshell report from Juno, this interview, and depending on what we have time for, we're just gonna keep on going. So let's just get started with this Calgary pokey thing.
And we begin with breaking news. Calgary police are investigating a stabbing on the Stampede Midway that sent 3 people to hospital. Mason Despatie joins us now. Mason, what do we know?
Jefferson, police were called to the Stampede Midway shortly after 11 for a serious assault near a ride called the Euro Slide. When officers got there, they found a man in medical distress. He was rushed to hospital in life-threatening but stable condition. Not long after, police responded to 2 more calls. A youth was found near 17th Avenue and McLeod Trail, and another man was located near Earlton Street and 27th Avenue Southwest. Both were also taken to hospital and are in serious but stable condition. Investigators now believe all 3 were victims of that same assault that took place on the Midway. Police believe it wasn't a random attack. So far, no suspects have been caught, but an officer this morning tells me they have CCTV footage and are confident arrests will be made. Jefferson, investigators do believe that several people witnessed this attack and may have even recorded it. Anyone with information or footage is asked to contact the police non-emergency line or leave an anonymous tip with Crime Stoppers.
Okay, thanks.
Now, I'm surprised, seeing as how they had the CCTV footage, why they didn't release that to the public. Usually when that happens, there's a, well, we'll call it an immigrant kind of thing going on, where they'll either say, well, it would be race-based, or it would be bad for immigration policy. It's one of these typical ploys that has been pushed down from the top, which of course is the Socialist Liberal Party. Socialist Party. They never used to be near as bad until about 8 years ago, and then it just got horrible. Now if it's the the chubby white guy barbecuing, you see his face on the bar on it, or the typical Indigenous Canadian, you'll see his face on there, but if it's anybody else, look out. They don't want to show you. It's just a sad state of affair. So moving on, U.S. representatives sent a letter pushing for stronger wildfire mitigation in Canada. A group of 6 United States representatives from Minnesota and Wisconsin sent a letter to Canadian Ambassador Kristen Hillman asking for stronger forest management practices on July 7th. This comes after wildfire smoke from Canada caused major air issues across the Northland and beyond this summer. Northland lawmakers Rep. Tom Tiffany and Representative Peter Stauber are among the 6 representatives who sent in the letter. The letter saying the Canadian wildfires have been getting worse over the years, with 2025 being one of the worst years on record. The letter went on to say that the wildfires in Canada have been driven by a lack of active forest management, also mentioning it has been mentioning arson has been the cause of wildfires igniting it. Now, I am going to go straight to the letter. So we write to you today on behalf of our constituents who have had to deal with a suffocating Canadian wildfire smoke filling the air to begin the summer. As we are entering the height of fire season, we would like to know how your government plans on mitigating wildfire and smoke that makes its way south. As I am sure you know, this is not the first year Canadian wildfire smoke has been an issue. In 2023, Canada had its worst year for wildfires on record. Last year's fire season was considered one of the worst, and this year seems to be a continuation of these previous years. While we know a key driver of this issue has been a lack of active forest management, we've also seen things like arson as another way multiple large fires have ignited in Canada. With all the technology that we have at our disposal, both in preventing and fighting firefighters, this worrisome trend can be reversed if proper action is taken. Our constituents have been limited in their ability to go outside and safely breathe due to the dangerous air quality the wildfire smoke has created. In our neck of the woods, summer months are the best time of the year to spend time outdoors, recreating, enjoying time with family, and creating new memories. But this wildfire smoke makes it difficult to all those things. Canada has been a friendly neighbor of the United States and the states we represent. So given the significance of this issue, we urge you relay this message to your government, in particular Natural Resources Canada and the Canadian Forest Service. Thank you for your time and your consideration. We look forward to your response. This was on the 7th. There has still been no response. Not surprised. This is the grandparent scheme.
A Montreal man suspected of leading Canada's largest grandparents scam network has been arrested. The RCMP says real estate developer Gareth West is now in custody. He has been accused of defrauding American seniors out of $30 million. CBC News published an investigation last month detailing West's alleged criminal activity. Matthew Lapierre has been following all of the developments for Montreal. Now, Matthew, tell us more about this alleged scam network.
Right, well, there's a couple things that make this alleged scam network really interesting, and one of them is just how prolific it's alleged to have been. West is allegedly the head of a scam network that employed about 24 people who operated out of scam call centers in the Montreal area. Now, these scammers allegedly targeted American seniors exclusively and ran a complex series of money laundering operations to get the money back into Canada, where West is alleged to have laundered it through real estate.
And Matthew, so this man presented himself as a wealthy real estate developer. What did you find out during your investigation?
Well, that's right. So it looks like to us, West ran a double life. Now, on one side, publicly, he presented himself as a wealthy real estate developer. He ran this company called West Developments, which bought and sold real estate and flipped properties both in the Montreal area and in southern Ontario. But it looks like to us, our investigation found that West became much more wealthy around the time that this alleged grandparent scam is alleged to have begun operating. Now, around that time, he bought some apartment complexes in southern Ontario worth millions of dollars, and he paid for some of them in cash. All this time, West was also living a luxury lifestyle. He was traveling the world. He was filming himself on social media on yachts. He enjoyed extreme sports. He really had a flair for luxury. And if the allegations against him are true, it looks like a lot of the money that West was spending both on property and on his lifestyle came from the proceeds of this grandparent scam.
It appears he wasn't working on his own. Tell us about this alleged member of the scam that continues to be on the run. What happens next?
Right, so there is still one alleged scam network member who is on the run. Now, we don't know where that person is. In fact, until today, we weren't sure where West was. He had been on the run since March when the other alleged members of the scam were arrested. Now, West was arrested today in Quebec, and he will face extradition proceedings along with the other members of the scam. Essentially, U.S. prosecutors want the scam members brought to the United States, where their victims allegedly were. There, they face charges of conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and if convicted of those crimes, some of the scam members could face up to 40 years in prison.
Now, I wonder if that would all be done through TD Bank, which got slapped in the Kaiser for knowingly smuggling, laundering, drug, extortion, and other monies down in the States, which mainstream media doesn't like talking about. But that's what kind of gets us going into our next story. So the courts compelled the RCMP and TD Bank to hand over records related to freezing of peaceful protesters' bank accounts. The Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms announces that the judge of an Ontario Court of Justice has ordered the RCMP and TD Bank to produce records relating to the freezing of Mr. Evan Blackman's bank accounts during the 2022 Freedom Convoy protest. This is a big slap. It's nice to see there are still a few good judges out there. Mr. Blackman was arrested in downtown Ottawa on February 18, 2022 during the federal government's procedure use of the Emergency Act. He was charged with mischief and obstruction. He was acquitted of these charges at trial on October 2023. However, the Crown appealed Mr. Blackman's acquittal in 2024, and a new trial is scheduled to begin on August 14, 2025. Mr. Blackman is seeking the records concerning the freezing of his bank accounts to support an application under the Charter at his upcoming retrial. His lawyers plan to argue that the freezing of his bank accounts was a serious violation of his rights and are asking the court to stay the case accordingly. The freezing of Mr. Blackman's bank accounts was an extreme overreach on the part of the police and the federal government, says constitutional lawyer Chris Fleury. These records will hopefully reveal exactly how and why Mr. Blackman's accounts were frozen, he says. Mr. Blackman agreed, saying, "I'm delighted that we will finally get records that may reveal why my bank accounts were frozen. This ruling marks a significant step in what is believed to be the first criminal case in Canada involving a proposed charter application based on the freezing of a personal bank account under the Emergencies Act," which was already deemed unconstitutional. Yes, the Emergency Act. Previous episodes. And as more and more this evolves, I will, as always, be doing episodes on it. That's why I created the channel. Sorry. Just the truth. Just the facts. Now, I am going to post this interview that was done on Rebel. Good old Rebel News. It is with the actual lawyer representing him, John Carpe, from the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms. So, for your viewing pleasure. Now, moving on. Whereabouts are we here? Right. There is this that dropped this morning that isn't getting near enough, well, let's just say, news time. Cuts at Ontario colleges are leading to nearly 10,000 job losses, the unions say. The Ontario Public Service Employees Union says close to 10,000 college faculty and staff have either been let go or are projected to lose their jobs amid hundreds of program cancellations and suspensions last year. The union, representing some 55,000 college faculty and support staff, say that amounts to one of the largest mass layoffs in Ontario's history, as colleges grapple with a funding crisis. An arbitrated faculty contract between the union and the college employer council released last week says the federal government's cap on international students led to a dramatic decline in enrollment and tuition revenue, and the cancellation or suspension of more than 600 college programs. The document shows 23 of 24 colleges in Ontario have reported a 48% decrease in first-time semester enrollment of international students from September 2023 to September 2024. It says 19 colleges have reported current and planned staff reductions totaling more than 8,000 employees as of June, noting the data was incomplete as some colleges hadn't reported their layoffs yet. The union says the layoffs and program suspensions will have generational impacts, and college workers are prepared to fight back against cuts. Well, please do fight back, because this is all stemming from Liberal corruption. Again, previous episodes. This is all part of the immigration scam that has been going on for far too long under the Liberal government. This is, again, I've reported on this. Others have reported on this. Borgman, like I had on the last episode, had mentioned this again in his presser that he had held. This is just a symbolic exposure of the corruption of the Liberal government. This was all a forms of using your taxpayer dollars to fund immigrants, and then the immigrants themselves, their families were investing tens upon tens of $1,000s through scam agencies ran by, for the most part, people affiliated to the Khalistan extremists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and all the rest of these nasty organizations. This is, sorry, but not sorry. When you work for the system and the system's corrupt, this is what you get. And this is why you're not going to see near as much media attention on this, because if they do, people will start asking questions going, well, why are these 10,000 people, why did they even have these jobs to begin with? And when did the explosion happen? And it all roads and fingers go to the Liberal Party. Moving on.
NDP rise from the ashes. Well, joining me to dive into these topics and more is our City Talks panel. We have Sharon Carr, Jeff Rutledge, and Aaron Morrison. Thanks very much. Aaron, we're going to start with you and childcare. A new report card finds that all of the provinces are not going to meet the targets, 5 in particular, including Alberta and Ontario. Who's to blame for that?
The goal is right, the execution has been wrong, and both premiers and the federal government share blame for this.
Okay.
Federal government put money on the table, kind of one-time money in a one-time contract, and then walked away, whereas the premiers signed for that money and then didn't hold up their end of the bargain. And as a result, we have childcare that's too expensive, not $10 a day, $20, $30 a day or more. And we have not enough childcare spaces. In Ontario, there are families looking to get on a $10 a day childcare list, even though it's not $10 yet, and they wait months and months, if not years, for a space.
Definitely, and I know, Sharon, personally, in talking to childcare advocates, some daycares can open 5 days a week, and they say to parents, you can only do 2 or 3, maybe 4 if you're lucky.
Yeah, so the problem with programs that get implemented from a federal level like this, where there's different jurisdictions involved, I think everyone kind of, the execution falls flat, because the feds are not the ones who are running these daycares either, right? So provinces are signing up and not signing up, and then it trickles down to like the municipalities and who subscribes to them. So I think the idea and the concept of it is so wonderful, and we need it because daycare, childcare is so expensive. But unless there's a mechanism of enforcement or how is it mandatory?
Which the feds should be doing?
I think it's multi-jurisdictional. And this is where the whole like multi-jurisdictions and having a federation and provinces become complicated. But I think that it's unfortunate, but I think there's equal blame across to put on multiple jurisdictions.
Jeff, let's talk about cuts. A memo went out yesterday to federal ministers that they have to cut 7.5%. How is that going to be done? Mark Carney needs to find some money so he can pay for his promises with defense, for example. How's he going to do that without gutting programs?
Well, I think it's pretty clear over the last decade or so that there's been significant bloat in government. That's one of the greatest criticisms that's been leveled by Conservatives against the former Trudeau government. And so I think it's clear that there is money to be saved. The total number of government employees has ballooned, especially in the last 5 years. And I think there's an opportunity to right-size government. That doesn't mean necessarily that critical programs need to be canceled, but what it does mean is that difficult decisions need to be made about the things that we need as Canadians versus the things that we want as Canadians. And I think it's going to upset a lot of folks that some of the particular things they like might not be there, but the things that they need ideally will be.
But where would you start? I mean, I know it's not a fair comparison, but look at Trump and his cuts, not executed wisely from what we're seeing, and having some catastrophic consequences, where would you start?
Yeah, well, I think, again, at a base level, I think there has been bloat in terms of tasks associated with the number of people that are working in the government. Fundamentally,
Sharon's nodding. Aaron,
Well,
you're not.
I don't agree. This government has also been taken to task on spending billions of dollars on consultants doing work that staff could be doing. We could be using the staff that are there. We could be using them better. And instead, we spend extra money on consultants. Get rid of the consultants, keep the staff. If you are going to cut 7.5% across the board, and remember, we still have to find $150 billion for defense, that's healthcare, that's education, that's people's pensions, that's every single service we count on as Canadians being gutted so that all the money can be shuffled over to defense and to pet projects. It's dangerous, it's scary. Job losses alone will be problematic for the country, let alone the service cuts.
Sharon.
So I value the idea and the concern around services getting cut, like Aaron just said, but I think Jeff and I will agree on this, is that there is bloat. And I just speak from my own experience, having worked in the government. I'm probably one of those few rare liberals who are more center-right leaning, who kind of understand that consultants, I agree. I think we don't need the number of consultants that get in there. But let's be real. There are skill sets that not every public servant is able to fulfill. And that's a bigger picture. I personally don't think the federal government should be one of the largest employers in the country. Attrition is not going to be enough to bring that down. I do think that there are a lot of people doing a lot of tasks.
And this is hilarious because PSAC and all of these other unions, they were blasting and lying about what the Conservatives' goal was. They were going to do it all through attrition. And then, of course, get rid of all of these consultants. That was like, they were going to do that within the first 100 days. You know, they were going to have a serious government for once. They were going to not take summer holidays, and just go on their barbecue season. They were actually going to start fixing what's broken, which is the entirety of our government. Every single aspect of our government has been shattered. It has been money has been thrown everywhere and doled out in order to buy votes. Now, the daycare thing. The daycare has been one of the biggest, just absolute atrocities that could possibly have it was a hook with a large chunk of taxpayers' bait that never could work. The federal government threw this on the laps of all the provinces. So they came out, we're going to do this. And don't forget, Jagmeet Singh, the sellout himself, was, and he agreed to all of it. Because they were looking for votes. They didn't care about, could Canada afford it? Was it feasible? And how do you roll this out and still ensure that the people who are running the daycares are making a livable wage? How do you do that at $10 a day without taking huge amounts of money from taxpayers? Well, the federal government's broke and on its way to being bankrupt. And now here's Carney. These unions are all, slandered the hell out of the Conservatives. And now rumor through the mill is there's going to be massive layoffs. Skip the attrition. Skip the wait until they retire and don't fill the jobs. Because Carney has promised all of this money spending. He's doing the same thing that the turd did. We can't afford this. We're broke. Yes, we should be meeting our NATO promises. Of course, yes, we should have a military. And yes, our military should make a good wage, considering, they put their life on the line for us. I think that, that's a good start. But how do you do that when you have got 10 years of the most incompetent children running our government? All hell's breaking loose, people. And all you unions that listen to your reps hack and just lie about the Conservatives, you've got it coming. You got it coming. I urge people, like, share, and subscribe, because not enough people obviously got to see what was going on. Like even the auto sector, you guys are toast. This EV mandate, it doesn't look like the government's going to budge on it. Goodbye, auto sector. And it was already on its way down. There's lots of reports on there. We were selling off, what was it, in 2022? It was like 3 million vehicles, and then it went down to 2.5 the next couple years, and then it went down to like 1.8, and now they're pushing this EV mandate on. What do you think is going to happen? Why do you think Carney has closed all communication to the public, any transparency on what happened in that meeting with the big three? Because as I have shown on previous episodes with the CEO of Ford, they were already they were preparing to start shutting down plants in Canada. They saw it and they were waiting for the government to change. And it wasn't. And this last election, they were like, this, and then of course Trump putting in what he was doing, they were like, this just makes it easy because now we have even more incentive, because now at least the US is going to help us clear red tape so we can bring all that manufacturing south, and people can make really good wages because they don't get taxed half of their income, and we can start producing the cars that we know are going to be around for hundreds of years because batteries suck, which we're going to get at a little bit later.
So the mood is, a little lower.
But it's the unknown.
Public servants are on edge, waiting to see how deep the federal government is willing to cut. All federal ministers are being asked to find billions of dollars in savings within their departments and agencies. By August, they need to be ready to present their plans to reduce operational spending by 7.5%, ahead of Prime Minister Mark Carney's first budget this fall.
I'm very concerned.
Today, unions that represent hundreds of thousands of public service workers were briefed by the government on what the spending review means for jobs.
It definitely feels like the public service workers are going to be bearing the brunt of this. It doesn't have to be a cuts to services and jobs. It could be doing the work smarter.
Some federal workers say the Liberals should trim management ranks, sell off real estate, and end the use of consultants to reduce costs. One union called Carney's proposal arbitrary austerity measures that are disconnected from the question of who is going to deliver on his promises to Canadians. The government says the intent is not to slash programs or services to fund Canada's new pledge to spend 5% of GDP on defense. But it remains to be seen whether Carney can keep that promise while also holding on to his commitment to keep the deficit in check.
Something's got to be done to square that circle.
We reached out to the Treasury Board president for an interview about what may or may not be on the chopping block as part of this expenditure review. He was not available.
Of course not. Zero transparency, people. You voted for your own job losses, or even worse, more debt. And all of this is because independent media made this aware that the fiscal update of the government should have produced and the budget Canada needs. This is the report that I reported on previously when it came out. It's pretty much stating there is no way our budget is going to be under 80, our deficit is going to be under $80 billion. And these guys also take into account that the Liberals have been lying for years on our budget. There is money that is just flew the roost, unaccounted for, disappeared. Wow, we don't know. We don't know, while all of their Liberal supporters and these companies of their spouses and people that they're related to are making hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars for nothing. This is corruption. This government has to go. We need serious investigations, and we need to actually start putting politicians in jail. You want to smarten up the political system? Start putting corruption where it belongs, behind bars. And then you've got, I was going to show that. I'm not even going to show her. Angelina Jolie. Minister Jolie. She's just a complete waste of skin. She gets up here and, oh heck, I'll show the little clip. And Listen to the media and watch her smile. This is what I need to show you. Propaganda. This is propaganda.
Niti Bercha with Global National News.
Global
we heard
National.
that this announcement made today is a matter of national sovereignty. You also said Canada is not for sale. Comments perhaps that may not take on such meaning or maybe not even have been mentioned had it not been for threats from the U.S. president. So that's what I want to ask you about. Donald Trump says he wants to put new 50% tariffs on copper. Does your government still believe that Canada can get a deal without tariffs on Canadian industries by July 21st? And will you agree to a deal with the U.S. that maintains any tariffs on Canada?
Okay, so first and foremost, when it comes to the latest declaration from the president in the United States, we have not yet seen an executive order. Of course, our embassy in Washington is following very closely, as well as the entire team back in Ottawa. That being said, every single journalist in the country wants to have more information about the negotiations, and my answer is always the same. We will let the Prime Minister do the negotiation, supported, of course, by our negotiator-in-chief back in Washington, Kirsten Holman, and we will not negotiate in public. That being said, being the Minister of Industry, my job right now is to make sure that in the context of this trade war, I'm supporting the front lines of this trade war, which are the workers and the companies affected by the unjustified tariffs against aluminum workers, against also steel workers, and of course against the auto workers. And that's what I'm working every single day.
So forget the farmers, forget China, forget the fishermen. They're irrelevant. And skip the the wood industry. They're irrelevant. This whole they're in heavy talks. Because this is an existential threat. That's why we shut down Parliament and we're all out on holidays. Yes, if it's so important, where's Carney? Oh, Mark Carney is on holidays and the government won't say where. Again, I'll post the link below and you can read it. Sounds like he's somewhere hiding in Canada. Probably, one of the beautiful little getaways that's paid for by your tax dollars. Nobody knows. Absolutely crazy. I just want to throw this out there for, the auto sector, a little wake-up call to the reality of, how successful EVs are going to be in the future.
Major fallout for EV owners in any industry who services electric vehicles on the island and surrounding Gulf Islands. New Transport Canada rules prohibit the electric vehicles on BC ferries if they are damaged or being towed. And there are other changes when it comes to charging. Here's Ollie Herrera.
It's no secret that electric vehicle use has risen over the last decade. BC remains as one of the leaders in EV adoption per capita. And if you ask towing companies, there's no short of work on those vehicles.
We probably handle at least 10, 15 EVs, a day, between 2 and 4 a week.
But now they're worried they won't be able to take on any more jobs handling EVs. That comes after this memo was sent to them by BC Ferries, outlining that because of Transport Canada regulations, many electric vehicles won't be allowed on board.
It's a problem brewing. There's a storm brewing.
Moving forward, BC Ferries says electric, hybrid, and alternative energy vehicles won't be able to charge up at any of their properties. EVs with cosmetic damage will still be allowed on board at the discretion of the vessel master, and if it's driven on its own power.
Okay, let's read exactly, because he breezed through this very fast. Electric, hybrid, and alternative energy vehicles prohibited from charging at BC Ferries properties and on vessels. Vehicles with minor or cosmetic damage that clearly doesn't affect the battery or wiring are allowed at the discretion of the vessel master, provided they are being driven under their own power. Vehicles with major damage, including exposed batteries, fluid leaks, or wiring issues, are not able to be transported. Electric vehicles that aren't being driven, like those on tow trucks, aren't allowed on board.
Vehicles with major damage, including exposed or leaking batteries, will not be allowed on board. This also applies to vehicles placed on top of flatbed trucks, like tow trucks.
There is no way for me to tow it over on a flatbed tow truck because their wording stated that if it is inoperable, which it's going to be on a tow truck, I can't take it on board their vessels.
The big reason for this policy change is because of potential fire and environmental risk from damaged batteries. But as one of the few towing companies on Salt Spring Island, Jonathan Vipond is worried the batteries will combust on people's properties instead of being properly disposed.
What's going to happen to them as they decay into the earth? Are they going to combust? Is there going to be fires on Salt Spring or the Gulf Islands? And if so, can they be extinguished?
These are the borderline type ones, and it's again, more questions than answers right now. But
another problem they now face is what to do when they get a call.
There isn't a recycler that we are aware of, and I've called a number of companies up and down the island, and nobody is aware of any recycler that deals with hybrids or EVs. We understand that there is one in Vancouver. Now we're back to the same problem again with the BC ferries.
When it comes to the dangerous goods sailings, Vipond was told EVs wouldn't be allowed on those sailings as well. BC Ferries hasn't confirmed that information with Czech News.
And I'm not in disagreement with BC Ferries for the decision that they've put in place. But the problem is they put something in place that all of these vehicles are already on the Gulf Islands, and there's a lot of them. They need to have means to get repaired.
Czech News has contacted Transport Canada for more information on the new regulations.
So good luck for anybody on an island who has an EV, because as most people know, after a short period, most of the time, nobody wants the vehicle if the battery's gone, because to actually pull the car apart and put a brand new battery in and then follow through with all of the wire checks, the seals, because they have to be 100% water protected, you might as well buy another car. This is a huge problem in the EV market that nobody's talking about. And now we're going to start seeing them piling up. And what happens when they pile up and moisture gets in? You have huge fires, nasty fires. One EV burning produces more greenhouse gases, sulfuric gases, all of the nastiest things than a small town produces on all of its electricity through natural gas. And I believe that statistic was a town of 500 people or less. One EV. And that's in a year what the entire town produces. So, yeah, elbows up. Now, let's jump into this amazing interview.
Look, Travis has been dealing with the CBC for a long time. I mean, he's been an employee for years, but over time, he experienced a lot of discrimination. He was dissuaded from bringing conservative voices onto the show that they gave him. And they retaliated against him. They harassed him. He was being bullied by some senior correspondents in Ottawa. I think you can guess maybe who I'm talking about, and there'll be more shared about that a bit later. And, finally, the CBC tried to break him, but he decided he wasn't going to be muzzled. They wanted him to sign an NDA, and he refused. And he has resigned. And he is going to use his voice. And there will be more. There will be a lot more to come on this case. But I think the CBC is probably shaking in their boots about what he's going to be exposing.
Well, it seems like they have something to hide here. I wanted to zero in on something you said, that he tried to have conservative voices on his show and that CBC objected to that. I'm sorry, like, conservatives are like half the country, right? And so this idea that they don't want to have conservative voices, can you elaborate on that? Like, do you mean partisan conservatives, or do you mean people who hold small c conservative traditional values in this country?
I mean, small c conservatives, conservative politicians. I mean, Travis is a journalist, right? Like, he had his show and he wanted to debate issues and actually debate them from all angles, not just, have four people who are all debating it from the liberal point of view. And when he would try and bring on like small c conservative voices or conservative politicians just to, to actually have diversity of opinion, he would get stonewalled and he would get blocked and he would get attacked from internally at the CBC. That was shocking to him, right? Because again, he's thinking, well, this is my job as a journalist, is to actually explore issues and get down to the truth. So I think the CBC looked at him as a token. I think they looked at his skin color and they thought he was going to espouse a certain worldview, a liberal worldview. And when they didn't, or when he didn't, they freaked out. And
Wow.
they tried to muzzle him.
Honestly, it sounds a little bit like what happened to Jamil Javani at Bell. I think that he sort of has a similar story to tell. I've heard some rumors, Catherine, that
The mothership seems to be run by a very close knit gang of Ottawa based correspondents. And I think you can guess who those people are, who are pretty much micromanaging everything. I have seen, Candace, the emails. I have seen what was going on behind the scenes, and it was shocking. Now, I do a lot of cases involving workplace bullying and harassment and toxicity, and I have to say, from what I've seen at CBC, it's one of the most toxic workplaces I've witnessed. Travis was simply trying to do his job, and he was being treated like the enemy. He was being treated like he was doing something wrong, something evil, and they really did try and break him. And again, as to my earlier point, I think there was resentment that he was able to book certain guests because they did feel comfortable coming on his show because they knew they were going to get a fair shake. They knew they weren't going to be like thrown the liberal talking points and sandbagged. So there was resentment that he could get certain guests, and then that would be, barred by certain individuals, and caused Travis to be very stressed out. He had to go take a leave. And Candace, they tried to make him sign an NDA when he posted that tweet about Catherine Tate.
Right. So just to provide some more background on that, the story that came out was that in the wake of CBC layoffs and people losing their job in newsrooms across the country, we learned that the executives over at the CBC were taking multi-million-dollar bonuses, and it was probably the biggest story in the country, at least on social media. And so Travis, being a journalist, just said, I issue an invitation to the president of the CBC to come on the show and just talk about it and explain what's happened, which to me seemed pretty reasonable. Seemed pretty good journalism, I admit. I thought, hey, he's got courage to invite his boss onto his show like that. But in some ways, he was giving her a lifeline. He was saying, hey, I'll give you a platform to just explain to the people in the country what's happening. And it seemed like to me that they took that as some kind of a hostile act.
Oh yes, they treated that like it was a cardinal sin. But of course, for them, it was the excuse they needed to really strip him from the air because they were already very frustrated with Travis. Because he wasn't being their little puppet spokesperson, he was actually trying to engage in real journalism and real diversity of thought. So they used that that was a catalyst for them stripping him off the air. And then they offered him, this was the offer. They said, you can come back to work in a demoted role, so no longer host of your own show, with a pay cut, but you have to sign a gag order. And they presented him with this crazy document, and of course he refused to sign it. It was Stalin-esque. It's like, in what work? I've never seen this in a workplace. And I've dealt with hundreds of workplaces in this country, big giant corporations. I've never seen a workplace present their own employee with a gag order.
It is Stalin-esque, and we criticize this.
It is Stalinist, and you know what it reminds me of?
And changing their behavior, like changing what they're saying on a subject, like becoming more extremist. And if someone was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards traditional values, gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist. But we also have to remember that
right, you got to remember, this is the new politics. This is socialism taking over every aspect of Canada, led by the most powerful tool a socialist, communist, dictatorship, fascist regime has, which is its propaganda.
And CBC wrote to me and after that and said, we consider him to still be an employee. We don't accept his resignation. If he wants to resign, he has to sign a whole bunch of forms. And I just said to them, I really think you guys need to spend some time looking at your policies and your internal culture, because this is crazy. So yes, CBC has not accepted his resignation. They are out there telling the media that he's still an employee. I would like to be very clear today on your show, Candace. Travis is not an employee of CBC anymore. He resigned involuntarily, but he resigned.
Well, good for him.
He was forced to involuntarily because CBC wouldn't let him. And the kicker to it all, and this is one of the major problems. Now, I'm not anti-union. Unions had their place. They brought the justice to the workforce. But now they are being used as tools for the said companies, which we saw in the election. We saw all of these government unions, hospital unions, I can just go on and on and on, run slander campaigns, auto unions, against the conservatives. When the conservatives were right on every single issue. And now the dominoes are still falling, and Canada is, well, a post-national socialist state. The unions are a huge, huge problem.
Like, really, the CBC wants to maintain control over him. That's really the true reason why they're not accepting his resignation. They want to feel like they still have control over him and can lord the collective bargaining agreement over him and their internal policies. They don't like that he took control of the situation. But yes, I want to talk about his union for a second, because they are so useless. I really wondered, was the union representing Travis, or were they representing CBC? From what I saw, it looked like they were representing CBC. They were certainly in cahoots with the CBC. They weren't doing anything for him. They knew all of the things that were happening. They didn't do anything. No grievance was filed. Travis wrote a long complaint against certain individuals for bullying, harassment, retaliation. Was not investigated. That's a breach of his employment and human rights. So because he's in the union, he cannot sue the CBC civilly. However, he can sue them in human rights court. No collective bargaining agreement or union can take away your right to enforce your own human rights. So he can sue in the Canadian Human Rights Commission for breaches of his human rights. I think the fact that he was targeted because of his desire to have a diversity of opinions. He was tokenized because of the color of his skin. And then he was retaliated against and mistreated and intimidated while he was on a leave because he was so stressed from the way they were treating him. Those are all human rights violations. So CBC will have to answer to us in court.
Well, we will look forward to following along with this story.
We will all look forward to following along in this story. Now, as far as I'm concerned, unions, the abuse that union leaders are doing to their own members is, well, they have an obtuse way of thinking, and it's because we allow unions to use their power in elections. This should be illegal. It's been tried to have been brought to court, and again, bad judges have said no, we're gonna we can't do that. No, we have to allow that. I'm sorry. Unions are self-destructing because they're being used as tools to manipulate public opinion. They are using the power of their entire membership in order to push, donate, and help political parties. When I know people, lots and lots of people that are in unions that are completely against the politics that their union uses their name and their persona for. Unions shouldn't be allowed to be involved in politics. That would get rid of this altogether, because there would be no marriage between them and the CBC. Now, if you listen carefully, too, on how she worded that, they run CBC just like the Liberals run their party. You can't remove the head. They voted against it again. All the other political parties, they can have reviews, and they can literally remove their leader. If they say, whoa, man, this leader is getting just too wacko, we can get rid of him. Liberals, no, that's socialism. They do everything behind closed doors under the pretense of, here, sign an NDA so that you can never say anything or sue or have any type of legal action or expose anything within this corporation. And in the Liberal government, they do everything under cabinet confidence, which is, in fact, an NDA. You cannot leave that room and state anything. You are bound. You are gagged. The tokenism. How many Liberals have come forward expressing this? One of the largest being Chavez, which again, previous episodes. She did a great interview on Jordan Peterson where she pretty much just blows the entire... I mean, after that interview, the entire Liberal Party should have collapsed. It's just one more thing that mainstream hasn't reported on. They refuse to talk about holding this socialist government in power. This government is just... They're just as toxic and as horrible as their propaganda arm. Again, I post all of my links in the description. I urge you, watch this in its entirety. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to not only my channel, but to Juno News. This is an amazing network. They're on the ball. They ask any question. They don't care who you are, conservative, socialist, NDP. They don't care. If it should be in the public interest, if it should be exposed, they bring the sunlight to the question. Fabulous. Now, there's been a lot of people who have left CBC. I'm just going to hit a couple of them. Tara Henley. Why I quit the CBC. To work at the CBC in the current climate is to embrace cognitive dissonance and to abandon journalistic integrity. This was published January 3rd, 2022. For months now, I've been getting complaints about the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, where I've worked as a TV and radio producer and occasional on-air columnist for much of the past decade. People want to know why. For example, non-binary Filipinos concerned with the lack of LGBTQ terms in Tagalog is an editorial priority for the CBC when local issues of broad concern go unreported. Or why our pop culture radio show's coverage of the Dave Chappelle's Netflix special failed to include any of the legions of fans or comics that did not find it offensive. Or why exactly taxpayers should be funding articles that scold Canadians for using words such as brainstorm and lame. Again, this goes on and on and on. Read it. It'll be in the links. And then you go on to another person. Like this. His name is Jesse Brown. Now, Jesse Brown, the man who broke the explosive allegations about Ian Gomeschi. Now, Gomeschi. This was a scandal. He was like... This guy was the most toxic thing. I would never let... In fact, my daughters would have went home and told me what he'd done, and then I would have had issues, and I'd probably be in jail, because this man was so disgusting. And of all this whole masculinity and misogynistic that the CBC likes to preach, the whole time, they were hiding it from the public. They knew it was going on, but he fit all the criteria. The colored person, diversity, right? He took off. He was quite famous, not just in Canada, but around the world. He knew a lot of he had a lot of people that he was in contact with through the music industry and through all of these different artist industries. They didn't want to upset a good thing. They gave him ratings. In the meantime, this guy was an absolute pig. Well, Jesse Brown said, I've had about enough of that. And he blew the whistle. Yeah. He ended up creating his own podcast channel called Canada Land. Great. I've read some. He actually had some articles and stuff that they produce as well over the years. Fabulous. The guy's amazing. I urge you again, read this in its entirety. We've known about CBC for but you start, and like what was in this interview is that I didn't show because it's really long. There are, I guess, like almost 100 or so other people who have worked for CBC who have sent her emails who can't actually talk because they've signed NDAs, but are voicing concern and wondering, is there a way that we can start to really expose this? Is there a way that we can start to fight? Yes, I have seen this. Yes, I can do this. I can say this if you call me to court. I can't say anything else on this because I signed a NDA. You know, all the talk about all of this misogyny and, you know, super masculinity and all the... Why hasn't any of the governments banned NDAs? There should be a very small clause for an NDA, like when it comes to stuff like where you're producing copyrighted material or, you know, super sensitive material. But when it comes to conduct, anytime there's conduct involved, or when you know you're listening to laws being broken or purposeful manipulation and use of lies, then those NDAs should be scrubbed. We need laws to protect, especially women, because for the most part, they're the ones who, they're the ones that are most affected by NDAs. It just so happens in this case, we're dealing with both genders because it's the CBC. We need laws. Now, while we're on that, I'm going to brag a little bit. This is just some of my clothing that I have brought out. I just figured, perfect time to bring it out. I got a whole pile of some great products. If you guys wish to support the channel, you can do so. I don't make very much money off of these shirts and these, like the sweaters, and there's pants and shorts. There's also coffee mugs. I got stickers. There's some great products out there. I urge you, check out the store. There's some beautiful stuff out there. I make sure that the graphics are top quality. A penny's a penny. I'll take what I can get because I make zilch nada off of this channel. Now, the Conservatives have filed this. Dear Chair, the resignation of Travis Derange from CBC has reignited concerns about the organization's workplace culture, placing renewed scrutiny on its more than $1 billion in public funding and its ongoing pattern of executive bonuses. In a public statement, Mr. Derange states that he was forced to resign from the national broadcaster, citing deeply troubling concerns of retaliation, exclusion, and psychological harm at the CBC. Mr. Derange also asserts that what happens behind the scenes at CBC too often contradicts what's shown to the public. Given these damning allegations and that the CBC reports to its committee, it is critical that we hear testimony from Mr. Derange, CBC executives, and the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture, Stephen Guilbeault, the goofball himself, at the earliest opportunity possible, pursuant to Standing Order 106.4, we, the undersigned, are calling for the committee to be recalled in order to arrange hearings on this pressing matter. Sincerely, a whole bunch of Conservatives. The worst part about all of this, the embarrassing part is obviously, I need you to like, share, and subscribe. And it's that people like myself, independent journalists, have a really hard time because the government has suppressed us. I can't say things on this channel without being censored, but yet CBC can say anything they want and they don't get censored. This is what holds back independent media. This is socialism. But when you have the leader of a party, breaking stories 100 times better than anything the CBC has put out in the last year, you have got major problems with propaganda in your country.
How do they get the knives and the weapons? How does that happen?
That's one thing that is a little bit similar to the movies. Is they're creative bunch of people. They come up with all kinds of things, taking infrastructure apart, and now we've got drones and things like that, providing instruments into the institutions too.
So the drones, how do they do it? They drop it from the sky.
Yeah,
they just and they go over. There's an area where the prisoners get their outdoor time.
That's right.
And how does a prisoner know where to go to find the thing that was dropped from the sky? I guess was there a text message they get? Or
technology now attached to that is, it's of course one of the things they drop a lot of is cell phones, which provides them technology to arrange the next drop. And they'll time it to the rec periods or to movement periods. And that's certainly not unique to Drumheller Institution. We're seeing that in federal pens across the country.
And then what other, you told me offline that these drones actually deliver the contraband right to the prisoner's window sometimes.
We've had some settings where depending on the infrastructure of the window, they make almost little funnels out of sheets or other material, and then that drone will come right in, drop it in the funnel, and right into the cell window it goes.
There's a funnel.
They build it, well, like I said, they're a creative group. They build it out of all kinds of...
So they get a funnel, they stick the funnel out the window, and the drone drops the knife or the drugs or whatever into this funnel, and it slides right in.
And away it goes.
Oh my God, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's definitely this stuff out of movies nowadays.
Craziness. And again, I'll post the link, watch it in its entirety. Because this guy and his wife are involved. They've been doing this their entire lives. They're correctional officers. Who better to talk about the problems going on? And he goes on to say, the worst of the worst has happened in the last 10 years. And how the drug issue is one of the biggest problems, and how he toured. Now he's toured some of the provincial facilities in which they're bringing in this treatment program, and because he's one of the head union reps, when he goes, he's talking to other union reps in these other facilities. He is seeing what a difference it is making, as opposed to just feeding them drugs for them to go out and do the same thing all over again. Because they're in jail, it gives these people the chance to become rehabilitated. Isn't that what jails are supposed to do? Again, I urge you to watch this. It's in its entirety, because it's just like, leave it to Poilievre. Poilievre! Breaking stories. Has anybody been talking about how drones are dropping stuff off at penitentiaries? No. This is the reality. This is what people need to know. Now, one last story. I just had this. Wow. Quebec. Qu'est-ce que c'est?
After rejecting a liquefied natural gas project in the Saguenay region in 2021, Quebec now seems to have a new offer on the table. Marinvest Energy, a Norwegian company, wants to build a project in Quebec to liquefy natural gas and export it. According to the newspaper Le Devoir, the project would include a terminal in Bécomo and a pipeline several hundred kilometers long running through Quebec.
C'est un projet qui est très préliminaire, donc il nous reste encore à recevoir beaucoup d'informations.
This is a very preliminary project, so we still have a lot of information to receive.
Mais essentiellement, si c'est payant pour les Québécois,
basically, if it has economic benefits for Quebecers, we'll consider it.
on va le regarder. Si c'est pas payant pour les Québécois,
if it's not worth it for Quebecers, we won't consider it.
A few years ago, a project like this was out of the question in Quebec. One of the main reasons Énergie Saguenay didn't see the light of day was a report from the BAP, the agency tasked with assessing a project's potential environmental impacts. The report said the company didn't provide any guarantee the project would reduce global greenhouse emissions. It also said it didn't get enough social acceptability, and when it came to the economy, that there's already significant competition abroad. But this time,
And now we already know that if Canada would have stayed on track for the last 10 years and fulfilled all of the business opportunities that we had in building pipelines and exporting our natural gas, we could have removed over 6 times our country's actual complete entire carbon footprint. 6 times. Now, albeit our footprint is but we could have not only removed our own by selling, although we are already carbon neutral, previous episodes, we could have been cutting back on countries that are using, like, burning nasty things and reduced theirs. By selling our natural gas, we actually do make an impact reducing the global carbon footprint. Media doesn't like to tell you that because, sorry, so sorry, it's just the truth. It's just facts.
Vest Energy believes there's a strong business case for an LNG project in Quebec aimed at exporting Canadian natural gas to international markets, particularly in Europe, and that the project designed for zero carbon emission LNG production and Quebec's proximity to European markets offers a significant advantage over other sources in terms of energy security and the emission footprint. But this economist, who works with an organization that seeks to keep Canadian companies accountable for their emission promises, says that there's even less demand for natural gas in Europe now.
The EU following...
Listen to this verbal diarrhea, okay? Every single country in the last 10 years has come forward and pleaded with our government to give them gas. And then you have them promoting, this is media, this is propaganda, this is the CBC.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine has taken bold steps to reduce its reliance not only on Russian gas, but on gas, so to speak.
Marinvest Energy has registered several lobbyists at the provincial and federal levels. Greenpeace Canada says it's afraid of how that will influence the decisions.
And I'm happy today now that the population is getting informed about what's going on behind closed doors. It's exactly the types of problems that I was foreseeing with C5.
The federal bill allows the cabinet to fast-track projects it deems to be of national interest and override the regulatory process. The Liberals said the bill is necessary to counter a disruptive Trump administration. We reach out to the...
No. See how they lie? Why doesn't she say the facts? It gives them powers for them to pick and choose projects and then circumvent their own legislation that stops free enterprise. Socialism.
Office of the designated minister responsible for listing the projects, but we didn't hear back on time for this report.
Of course not, because you've got zero transparency when it comes to the Socialist Party. That's just the truth. That's just the way it is. God, I hope this government falls. It just can't be too soon. Unbelievable. While Carney's on holidays, Trump's putting more tariffs on us. Unemployment is skyrocketing. Chaos on the streets. Ah, man. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you wish to support the channel, please, you can do so by sending to my email at canadiancitizenjournal@gmail.com, or you can just do so by supporting me through the clothing and merchandise channel, which I showed you some pretty good. I got some pretty great stuff. There were some people that were sharing it online, and they were like, "Oh man, if this was real," and it was like, actually, it is. And then lo and behold, people are buying. So that's good. Helps me, like I said, helps me so I can maybe get back to having 2 episodes a day. Maybe I can end up doing this full time. As of right now, this is all donated time, all the equipment, everything that it takes. I don't make any money. Zero, zilch, nada. So anyways, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. If you are, punch that notification bell so you don't miss any future episodes. It also helps me grow my channel. Thanks for all of your comments. I read them all. I have got amazing subscribers, and of course your emails leading to potential other stories or things that I might have missed which are also awesome. And yeah, until the next time, I'm Alias to Guy. You've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. Stay informed.